Right behind me is a MSI desktop. It's using off-the-shelf components, so everything's standardized. So if you ever want to upgrade in the future or need to perform any sort of maintenance or repairs, you can go ahead and do that yourselves. Because these products are assembled here, we don't get a lot of the assets like product photos for retailers that headquarters usually provides. I usually help take the photos for these desktops, and I actually have 3 desktops that I need to shoot. So this looks like an Aegis series with a new 50 series graphics card in there. This looks like another 50 series Aegis desktop with a slightly different motherboard. This looks like the Maestro case or the Vision Elite. All 3 of these systems should have the new 50 series graphics card as well as fairly different motherboards. I see the Pro series and these 2, and this one looks like that motherboard I don't even recognize. But of these 3, I think this is the most wallet friendly. Then this is more expensive, and this one should be the most expensive of the 3 that I have here. Just to show you my setup, I have one light on the back heating up against the white backdrop, so it's easier to Photoshop out the background later. There's like white plastic boards and this turntable to easily rotate the desktop to get different angles. I have this one light to bounce off this V-flat to fill up most of the product itself. And I have this 3rd light to use more as like an accent lighting to help fill in some parts depending on the angle, because sometimes with just the front light and the back light, you lose some of the details on the product itself. Having a 3rd light to accentuate some of the details or accents of the desktop helps to make the product look a little better. And then I'll usually take some photos with the RGB off or the system off, and then with the RGB on. I'm shooting on the A7R5 with a 50mm 1.4. I have a variable ND and a polarizer on this lens, but I do have just a polarizer, but it actually doesn't fit on this lens, and I don't have the step down ring, so I'm kind of stuck with this variable ND. I don't actually really want to have the ND on this, so I could lower the aperture. The lights that I'm using are from Westcott. They're the FJ400s. I'm using the FJ-X2M. These aren't the newest lights from Westcott, but they get the job done. And what else? Yeah, so I already mentioned like the V-flats. I have 2 of them. So one thing that I noticed, usually what I do, because glass is very reflective, I'll use a combination of the polarizer plus these V-flats to reduce and minimize the reflections. What I've been doing is I'll use the black side to block off all the reflections. I'll move it right up against the desktop itself. But today I was playing around with the polarizer on this, and it looked like it would remove all of the reflections on the glass for this specific angle. So I actually want to try flipping it around so the light is bouncing off of the white side and into the case, so you can see more of the details inside. So I'm going to be playing around with that. With the polarizer right now, I think you can see that there's a reflection bouncing off of the glass. And then now when I turn the polarizer, it's almost completely gone. Right now it is 3:55. It's just a little over 2 hours left of work. I want to see if I can get through the usual photos that I usually take with desktop retail photos. The challenging thing is, for computers in general, you have different materials that make up the computer. So you have the plastic, you have the glass, and then some like maybe metal parts. They all have different reflective properties, so sometimes it's a challenge to get the lighting just right or like to minimize reflections. What's even harder with reflections, especially on glass, is curves. Curves, a nightmare to shoot cleanly. That one for sure is gonna be a challenge. I'm gonna save this one for last, and I'm gonna knock out the 2 Aegises to get it done. And I always wear some sort of gloves to try and minimize fingerprints on the PC itself, just so it's cleaner. But my hands get really, really sweaty when I wear these. It's not the most pleasant and enjoyable experience. I'm shooting at 1/15 of a second to capture the RGB effects on the desktop. And my aperture is at 5.6, and I've lowered my ISO to 400. Let me drop down the power of the first light and see how that comes out. Okay, I think it's better, it's more manageable. Yeah, now it's pure white. Or the polarizer wasn't blocking out any of the reflection from the white B flat. And then if I adjust it so it's pure black. So now the polarizer should be completely removing all the reflections on that side glass panel. While I'm not getting a lot of the right side illuminated, I think the lighting placement that I have isn't quite correct, but at least the logo is catching that third light now. So it's a little bit more reflective, so it stands out and pops just a little bit. It looks like I'm not going to be able to get the fan spin effect that I ideally would want with these product photos. The motion being frozen so you can see each fan blade, I don't really like. One thing I used to do is I would take the photos and composite them together. It's a little bit more work. I was hoping to be able to get it all done in camera. From what I found, every time I come and shoot these photos, I always have to set up the lights just a little bit differently. This is how new the desktop is. They just assembled it, and there's actually still the plastic peels on it. I don't know if you can see that. So that's one of the plastic peels, but then there's also one on this logo right here. And so this was causing a lot of the reflections. Now that it's off, let's see how the reflectiveness of this looks. Hopefully around the Dragon, it's not as reflective as it was with this plastic piece on top. So this was the desktop that I just finished shooting, and looking over here, this looks almost nearly identical, minus just the motherboard itself. If you look at the heatsink, very, very different. So that's why I said this one is probably cheaper, more affordable compared to this one, just because the motherboard difference. Done with these two Aegises, they were more or less pretty much identical. On to the third and final one. If I remember correctly, this case is a little bit confusing to take off the side panel. So you have to take the top panel off first. To remove the side panel requires removing a few screws. Straps, oh, there we go. Should have read. Shooting with reflections is already a challenge. Shooting with curves is another challenge. Shooting with reflections and curves is one of the most difficult challenges I can think of when it comes to product photography. Since this glass panel is more difficult to assemble and disassemble, I'm gonna start off with the side profile shot with the glass removed. All right, start off with the easy ones. Okay, there's a lot of fans on this one, on the flash and the triggers, so I gotta make this quick. Yeah. I've now completely enveloped the desktop in this space because I want to try to minimize as much reflection on the glass as possible. And so if you compare with what I've shot before and after, effectively have removed as much of the glare as possible, gradient or the whiteness on the curvature of the case. I'm flipping the V-flats around so the black is facing the computer itself, because I now want to see if having the black to subtract the light will help make it look cleaner. That just solved it. Oh my, I hate myself. I think I finally figured out how to photograph this curved case. I just gotta remember it next time, but using the V-flats to come right up to the edge of the camera lens on both sides with the black facing towards the desktop, towards the glass. So that'll cut back on the reflection, and so light won't bounce into this corner as much compared to the white that I initially had done. And it actually looks pretty clean. It is a little bit dark inside because of the protective film of the glass, and because I have to place the lights above the V-flats and bounce it off of the ceiling. There's not a lot of direct light I had bouncing off of the boards, or that was able to bounce into here. It is just a few minutes to 6 p.m. I want to get out of here. I think it's as good as I'm going to get with this photograph. I'm going to dump them on the computer and see how they look. I know the designers can do their magic with touching up the photos, and I think I gave them a really, really good base to work with, and that the product photos will look really, really nice. That's gonna be it for this video, for this little behind the scenes of myself photographing these desktops for MSI. If you have any comments, suggestions, feedback on what I could do to make this process a little bit easier, let me know in the comments. I welcome them. I'm gonna stop rambling now. Hope you enjoyed this video. Like, dislike, subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.